Hey everyone, welcome to this week's episode of Hormonally Speaking. We are going to be talking today about all kinds of fun stuff, including something that I know a lot of you are interested in because maybe you're going through a second puberty and that skin outbreak is happening, or maybe, there's just the stress of life is impacting your skin. So I know skin is such a huge, important topic for so many of you listening. And we're also going to talk today about a bunch of other interesting things like working non traditional hours, working non traditional jobs, working as an exotic dancer, which is what our guest today is doing now, and just kind of combining all of this stuff in order to be your best healthy self, even as you are maybe off hours, if you're not sort of following the natural circadian rhythm and all that kind of stuff. So it is possible. And my guest today is Danielle Sholly, who is an integrative nutritionist that focuses on women's health, beauty, and energetic wellness. When Western medicine failed to offer her answers for her irregular menstrual cycles and acne, she set out on a path to figure out the true root causes for herself. After a decade of studying functional medicine, nutrition, holistic healing, and gut health, she was able to balance her body from the inside out and clear her skin naturally. Now she helps women of all ages create the skin of their dreams through her customized one on one coaching program, Befriend Your Skin. You can find her at Danielle Sholly on Instagram. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you so much. So glad to be here.
Me too. So I'm super excited to talk to you about the skin aspect. Let's start there because, as I mentioned, that's such a huge, hard thing for a lot of women, right? Especially maybe if they kind of dealt with acne younger and then it got better and then it came back, or maybe they've been sort of dealing with that the whole time. I used to deal with acne when I was younger, but then it just morphed into
Mhm.
rosacea later in life. So it's like the acne finally went away and then the rosacea came in. So I certainly know how it is to deal with skin stuff, right? Struggle with that because it's like this is what's right in front of people's faces. So it's a big deal. So what's your story? How did you get on this path of working with the skin?
Yeah, it is such a big deal for a lot of people, and especially coming out of puberty and then getting pimples later in life can be just such a um, thing that just takes women's self-esteem down.
Yes.
And I think that I got to a point where I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to have acne and wrinkles at the same time.
Right. You're
So
like,
I was like,
"No."
no, this is not the vibe.
Yeah.
So my skin journey actually started when I was 19 and I got my menstrual cycle late in life. I actually started at 17
Oh.
and went immediately onto hormonal birth control,
Mhm.
as we know can be kind of a way that stunts your natural body's rhythm. So I went after my first period right onto hormonal birth control and then was on it for a couple of years. And when I got off birth control, my skin exploded. And
Mm.
I went down the same route a lot of people do, where it's like, let's try proactive, let's go to the doctor, like, give me this pill, give me this cream, right? Just the
Mhm.
whole Western medicine approach. And things sort of helped, but then the acne would come back. And there was always just this cycle of nothing being healed. So
Mm.
I was like, well, I think I'm gonna have to figure this out for myself.
Mhm.
And
As it's
that's when
done.
yeah, as a lot of people's story goes, right? It's
Mhm.
like healer, heal thyself. And so I've always been super interested in the root cause of issues and just
Mhm.
knowing deep down inside that there's something different going on. Like it's not something
Mhm.
topical. Like obviously something is coming from within my body and literally erupting out of my skin.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
what is causing that, right?
Mhm.
And I started to study nutrition. I went to the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and that was the beginning of a big aha moment for me and just understanding that health is so much more than just taking a pill or even a supplement for something.
Mhm.
It's a holistic healing process, meaning like your whole body and mind and everything has to be involved in that.
Mhm. So true. And we talk about that a lot on the podcast, right? Because sometimes I think we can go from okay, I don't want to take a pill from my doctor, but tell me what supplement to take to, heal or get better. And that's not going to work either. It's like supplements are so important and so helpful, and we need them in a lot of senses, but it's not just going to come down to that one thing. And we have to get out of that mindset of here we are, just hand me what I should take in order to get better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was lucky enough to live in a community where I was surrounded by healers.
Mm.
And my mother was actually a huge influence in my life. She's still alive and she's amazing. I was like speaking past tense. I was like, she's still here. She's awesome. Hey mom.
Everybody's like, "Phew, okay."
she she's always been more spiritual than religious. So
Mhm,
my upbringing was definitely more geared towards more esoteric things in nature and
mhm,
spirituality and syncing with the cycles of nature and paying attention to the moon and taking
mm,
echinacea when you're sick instead
mhm,
of the traditional over-the-counter medicine. So I've always had that influence in my life. And so I think that I just naturally was like, oh, I need to go see a naturopathic doctor
mhm,
or an alternative medicine doctor. And I started learning about functional medicine,
mhm,
which you're really big
mhm,
on. And it's so important because functional medicine actually gets to the root cause of the issue instead of just putting a band-aid over it.
mhm,
And so I was led to do blood testing and nutritional testing like that, and found out that different levels of vitamins were low, like vitamin D, and
mhm,
that I wasn't producing enough hormones and just different things like that, that I was able to get an actual picture of what was going on in my body.
mhm. So, besides those things that you just mentioned, what were some of the big things that you feel like, shifted your acne? Like, what did you kind of change or do differently?
Yes, so I tried everything, as I
Mhm,
mentioned, and then went into the functional medicine world
mhm,
trying everything. So
mhm,
I was doing all of the supplements. I was taking progesterone cream at
mhm,
one point. I was taking Vitex at
mhm,
one point, and just going down the list. It was the same as the medical system. It was like, go down the list of all the things they tell you to do.
mhm.
And I got so frustrated because I was doing all the right things,
Right. Yeah.
but still had the acne. And I think one of the big things that shifted for me is because I was so into the natural approach to life, my skincare was all natural based as well,
Mhm.
which is great. But I wasn't using anything that was actually assisting my skin in turning over
Mm.
the cells at a
Mhm.
more rapid pace. And so
Mhm.
one of the things with acne is that your skin doesn't shed as quickly as it needs to. So it
Gotcha.
gets clogged.
Mhm.
And that can be caused by a number of factors we could get into later.
Mhm.
But I had never heard about this before.
Mm.
No dermatologist, no one told me about the fact that our skin cells need to turn over more
Mm.
quickly and we need to assist our skin with that. So I think a big shift in my perspective was leaning into more skincare that I thought might have like chemicals in it
Mhm.
or
Mhm.
things like that.
Mhm.
Like I was scared of chemicals, right? I
Mhm.
was I was greenwashed, as they say.
Mm. Mhm.
And I was putting oils all over my face thinking that it was so good for me and just like, oh, it's like this organic oil that costs $50. It has to be amazing.
Right.
And I didn't truly understand skincare for acne. And so
Mm.
that was a big shift for me.
Mhm.
But then also the largest shift, and one thing I think we're excited to talk about today, is just like taking control of my healing from a more internal point of view,
Mhm.
meaning realizing that if I wanted clear skin, I needed to imagine myself with clear skin. I
Mhm.
needed to stop telling myself that I had acne and I had hormonal problems because I
Mhm.
was repeating the story and keeping myself in that loop.
Mhm. And we definitely are gonna dive more into that later because it's such a huge overlooked part, or even if people get that they need to sort of shift their mindset, it's really tough for them to do because you have to practice. You like constantly have to practice, right? Because those old patterns and ideas are deeply embedded in our brain, right? All of
So
those
much.
those neurons are firing to keep things the belief system the way that it was. And so it takes a lot of dedication and practice in order to create that new, view. And then, but that's when you start seeing differences in your body and whatever aspect we're talking about, right? It's not just skin, like any part of your health, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So when you started using some of the products that you mentioned, that were, and I just kind of want to speak to this because I think this is an interesting aspect of sort of the chemicals, because most of the people that are listening to this podcast, and obviously I talk about how many chemicals are in our environment that can impact us and impact our hormones. But I had Laura Adler, who's an environmental toxins expert, on the podcast. And if people didn't hear that episode, go back and listen to it. It was last season. And she really explained, like, everything's a chemical, really. So it's not every chemical is bad for you, right? And so
Exactly.
we need to sort of get really clear on the things that are um actually, acting like hormones in our body, for example, like xenoestrogens, versus some of the things that are safe. They're chemicals, but they're safe for us to use, and they are useful, like in what you're talking about in, say, turning over your skin cells and everything. So what are some of the ones that you used in order to help that?
Yeah, I love everything you just said, and it's like even though I'm using what are considered chemicals, they're still in a formulation that is completely safe. And
Mhm.
I don't use brands that are testing on animals,
Mhm.
and I don't use a lot of big box brands. We'll
Mhm.
put it that way.
Mhm.
I do still have my values pointed towards as natural as possible, least harm done to the body, right?
Mhm.
But there's certain very helpful ones like salicylic acid, which I'm
Mhm.
sure everyone is familiar with. But the issue with a lot of skincare lines that are targeted for acne specifically
Mhm.
is that they're geared towards teen skin and
Mhm.
just this one subsection of people who have acne.
Mhm.
And for myself, I was a woman who had acne and dry skin. So I didn't
That's not
have
common.
the
Yeah, combination.
no,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not common.
Yeah.
And I think that that was really challenging for me to be like, oh, when I use these acne systems, there's a lot of like foaming agents in them.
Mhm.
Like you usually have like a really harsh foaming gel cleanser, and then um, there's just like multiple steps of like lots of salicylic acid and things. So I think it has a more drying effect on the skin than
Right.
is necessary because they're trying
Right.
to
The
absorb all that
strip,
oil
right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
out of a teen skin.
Right.
So there really was just like a deep dive into, oh, how does the skin work? What does the skin actually need?
Mhm.
And so it was a fun, I guess, just learning opportunity for me to figure out how do I support my skin's hydration and keep a functioning skin barrier without
Mm.
stripping my skin of all the helpful oils,
Mhm.
but still get rid of this dirt and oil and things that are clogging and causing acne. So
Mm.
salicylic acid is one that I started using, but in like a toner form.
Mhm.
So I wasn't using it every single step, and I wasn't using like an acne system. It's like
Mm.
a 2% salicylic toner that you just swipe on the face. So
Gotcha.
that was very helpful.
Yeah.
Another ingredient that is very underrated that most people haven't heard about is azelaic acid.
Mhm.
And it's pretty easy to find. There's a brand called Paula's Choice that carries an azelaic acid booster,
Okay.
but that one is specifically researched for acne, and it's very gentle on the skin, but it is an exfoliator, so it helps kind of clear out the pores and things, similar to the salicylic acid. So those are
Gotcha.
two main ones that I incorporated, and there's a few more, and I could give people a whole skincare routine, which is what I love doing,
Yeah.
but everyone's a little different,
Right.
and it's really good to, when you are starting into the world of chemical exfoliants, to get some guidance there
Yeah.
so you know what you're doing.
Yeah. Work with people like you so that you can get the guidance. So I have to ask, because I do have rosacea. I've always heard that those aren't good, anything like that, that's gonna sort of, I guess, like, turn over the cells too much, that kind of thing, that it's not good for rosacea, but is that not true?
It's really dependent on what you're using and the exact formulation. So
Mm,
a azelaic acid in one skincare company can be totally different from
gotcha,
another company. So
gotcha.
it's hard to speak about things in blanket terms, as we
Right.
know, because the nuances are so important in
Yep.
nutrition and with anything really. So azelaic acid is actually one of the products that can be used for rosacea,
Oh, okay.
interestingly enough.
Okay.
Yeah, and it would really rosacea, because it is such an inflammatory issue, it is good to go really slow and
Mhm,
to not introduce too many things at once.
mhm.
Whenever you're doing skincare, people have this tendency to want to like overhaul it,
Yeah.
and they get extreme about it and they want to
They're
like
like, "I'm
throw
gonna buy these
everything
10
away.
things
Yeah,
and
they
start it all." Yeah.
yeah, so really like slow and steady wins the race with skincare, and
Mhm,
especially when you're dealing with an inflammatory conditions like rosacea and acne, it's really good to introduce one thing at a time,
mhm.
use it for a couple weeks, make sure your skin is responding properly, and then you can add in the next ingredient in the next.
Makes sense. I was also thinking about when you were talking about teenage skin and that those products are just kind of there to just like strip off all the oil. You know, I think a lot more about this than I did when I was young, but obviously hormones are just going crazy in the teenage years for most people. Do you find that skin is not necessarily as bad in a situation where a kid could maybe be eating better or, sort of eating in a way that's supportive of their hormones? I don't know if you've like seen any of this connection or not, but
Absolutely. I've actually worked with several teenagers
mm-hmm,
or parents of teenagers,
mm-hmm,
and the thing is, their skin can get cleared up just like an adult acne
mm,
person's skin can get cleared. We are not a slave to our hormones.
mm-hmm,
I
mm-hmm,
think that I think that acne is a signal that something else is going on inside of the body.
mm-hmm,
And it should be welcomed. It's like, oh, thank you, skin, for showing me that
mm,
something's going on, that I need to look deeper. So I
mm-hmm,
learned to have a lot of gratitude for my acne after
mm-hmm,
some time of being like, thank you, because it prompted me to look within and learn all these other things. But just as easily, the kids can clear their acne, and a lot of it is diet.
mm-hmm,
So if you're familiar with Chinese medicine at all, they do a face mapping for acne. And depending on where you have the acne on your face, it correlates to certain organ systems.
mm-hmm,
So supporting your liver, for instance, supporting your gut health with the right foods and the right lifestyle habits absolutely can help with
mm-hmm.
people clearing their skin at any age.
Yeah. And of course, it's not always easy to necessarily get a teenager to change their diet. But a lot of it, when I think back to my teenage years, we just weren't educated on that connection at
Right.
all. It's like we really had no clue. And there was generally, less access, I think, to sort of the healthier foods and the knowledge around the healthier foods than there is now. So, moms that are listening with kids that have acne, it can be, I
Yes.
mean, it's not only going to help their acne, it's going to help them be more balanced too in general, as they go through this like fluctuating period of, especially, with girls in this first few years
Mhm.
really of getting your period, like, it's crazy time because it's
Mhm.
like suddenly estrogen is flooding the body when the body's never dealt with estrogen, right? And so it takes time for the body to get used to that. So it takes time before you even begin ovulating to get that progesterone to help level things out a little bit, and I know you spoke to it earlier when you started at 17 and then you got on birth control pretty quickly after that. There's research that indicates it can take like 7 to 9 years for our bodies to stabilize after we start our period. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's why a lot of times when women, if they aren't on birth control and they get into their early to mid 20s, they're like, okay, things are a lot calmer now, but unfortunately, so many women do get on birth control in that period of time. So they'll attribute that calming down to the birth control, which obviously is impacting them. But yeah, it's pretty fascinating when you learn about how like getting in there early with birth control can really throw things off so much because you're not fully developed yet, essentially hormonally.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I want to say just to any parents out there who are dealing with a teenager is that they probably aren't as stubborn to change as you might perceive them to
Mm,
be.
mm,
And kids are actually very open to new ideas and to learning, right? They're
mhm,
so curious and they're so just like a sponge taking in the world. So, what I found working with kids is that, yeah, sometimes they don't want to hear it from their parents. So,
mhm,
sometimes hearing it from a different source, like a mentor, can be a really great thing for them and just
mhm,
help them have realizations they wouldn't have had. And I remember working with a young girl. She is 16, and she was just so ready for every session. She did the
mm.
homework every time. She just felt so, I guess, like thankful to be receiving the information because she didn't want to look like that.
Right.
Like you said, you're a kid going through this time of your life and everything is crazy and you just want like you don't want pimples on your face
No.
on top of all of it. So,
Definitely
if
not.
you can give them a solution, they are ready for
Yeah.
it.
And that makes
But
sense,
yeah.
particularly, I think, with acne, because yes, it is a deep motivating factor to make some changes when you have this thing that you can't hide, I mean, even with makeup, it's pretty hard to hide, like, some pretty bad
Yeah.
acne.
And the poor guys don't have the makeup
I
option, so
know.
they just have to deal with
Deal with
it.
it. I know, poor things. So, going back to your journey, at what point did you really start to see your acne, your face healing, I guess? How long was this process?
Great question. I did wanna touch on that because it can be like 3 to 6 months for a lot of people
Mhm.
when they start incorporating the proper skincare and really paying attention to any dietary or lifestyle factors that might be contributing to the acne.
Mhm.
And so for me, I would say it was about 6 months after I started doing the azelaic acid, the retinols, the salicylic acid, making sure that I was putting enough moisture back into my skin when I felt like I had my skincare really dialed in, and then also the other things in my life, my stress, my dietary factors, which can be really hard for a lot of people, and just kind of bringing everything together with the teens and even adults. The dietary things can be something that's overlooked and not often talked about when it comes to acne. Although I think there's like a general understanding that, like, oh, if you're stressed, you might get a pimple, right? Or things like that. But
Mhm.
one of the things I would tell your listeners is that dairy products, even goat products, like I would highly recommend removing from your diet at least for 8 weeks, just to see if that is contributing to your skin
Thank you for
issues.
saying that. I'm always trying to convince my clients. But yes,
And
I know
what's
dairy's hard to give up for a lot of people.
Well, and the hilarious thing about it is I had this one client and she really enjoyed cheese, right? Like as we all do.
Mhm,
And I was explaining to her the benefits of stopping and not for
mhm,
her skin and everything. She's like, there's no way I'm going to be able to give this up, right?
mhm,
And then literally just 2 weeks later, she was like, wow, this is actually easier than I thought.
mhm,
This
I
is
agree.
like, I
Mhm.
don't even miss it. And now when I eat cheese, I'm noticing the phlegm in my throat and I'm
Yep.
noticing how it's affecting my digestion. So I think it's really fun to challenge people and to just do like give them the opportunity to do a little self experimentation and just
Mhm.
see how you feel. You don't have to give it up forever, it doesn't
Exactly.
have to be this big thing. Just like have
Exactly.
a little ease with yourself and use it as an experiment.
Yeah, absolutely, and sometimes we need a little convincing for a little while, but it is both. I mean, gluten actually, I think, can take a little bit longer sometimes to see the results because I know sometimes people have cut it out for, a month or 6 weeks and they're like, I didn't notice any difference. And I was like, well, the impact of gluten can really hang around for quite some time after we cut it out. Some say, up to 6 months and a year. So,
Mhm.
but usually I'd say within like 3 months, most people are going to notice a difference with gluten. But with dairy, it's pretty quick usually
It
that
is pretty
people will
quick.
notice. Yeah, yeah. So, and I'm glad you made the point about the skin thing, because I definitely tell clients when they come to me where skin is a major issue, I'm like, this is probably one of the last things that's going to improve, right? Your
Yeah,
digestion's going to get better first, your inflammation's going to go down, you're probably, I mean, all the random things that people can experience, from inflammation, joint pain, and, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But the skin, it just, I always try and explain, it's like your body needs all these nutrients, and you probably have been, missing out on some of these nutrients because of not getting the right foods or not digesting and absorbing the nutrients from those foods. And so your organs and your tissues and all of that are going to like take that first, and then those outer extremities, aka your hair, skin, and nails, are going to come in last, because they're kind of the body's like, well, we don't, I mean, you obviously need your skin, but like it can be sort of broken down and everything's going to be okay. Right. They're like, we
exactly.
need to keep the liver running. So, the kidneys are going to get
Priorities.
stuff first. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So, it's helpful for people to understand that coming in, because I think so many times they're like, I just want my skin to be better, like right off the bat, and hair too, that's another big one for especially women in their 40s when they start losing that hair.
Mm.
So, um,
Yes, and
go ahead.
well, I was gonna
Yeah.
say I tell people they don't have a skin problem, they have a gut problem.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until I really did some gut healing protocols that I noticed the biggest difference in my skin.
Mhm.
And you're right, it does take a little bit longer. And that's why people get so frustrated with acne and why it's so hard to clear. A lot of like, if over the counter acne systems worked, then
Right.
we wouldn't have as much acne as we do right now.
Uh,
There are other
they make
things
so much
going
money
on.
off of those too, right? Because it's like it just keeps feeding the problem. But people,
Exactly.
maybe it'll get a little bit better, or they just feel like I haven't done it long enough, or what have you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And for me, I think that food intolerances can play a big role because you're irritating the gut
Mhm.
consistently. And like you were talking about with the gluten, it's not like you can feel leaky gut syndrome.
Right. Right.
And it's not like you can feel gluten inflaming your villi in your
Right.
stomach. Like it's
Right.
not something that's super tangible for people.
Yeah.
And so I do think that can make it a little bit harder to stick to something when you're not like seeing the results yet.
Mhm.
But it's important to really just start getting intimate with your own body. Start paying attention more to how foods make you feel. So I always challenge my clients with a week of a food diary, but
Mhm.
also like a food and mood diary.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
not only are they writing down what they're eating, but then they're writing down like their energy levels. Like, are you feeling cranky today? Like, how are your bowel movements? Just like paying attention to all these little intricacies because your body is constantly giving you signs. It's constantly
Yes.
talking to you. And the more awareness you have of your own body, the better that you're just going to be able to create the correct diet for you without listening to anyone else. Like, you're going to be able to listen to your body and understand what it needs and what it thrives on.
Absolutely. That's such an important point, because I believe, despite the fact that I utilize testing and all of that, half the time we probably wouldn't need testing if people really tuned in and listened to their bodies and accepted what our bodies are telling us, right? A lot of
Mm,
times, I mean, I've seen it time and time again where
yeah.
we'll run a test and a client will be like, well, yeah, I thought I probably had a dairy intolerance, or I thought I had a gluten, but like they needed to see it like in printed form, and
It is
that's fine.
helpful to
It is
see.
helpful. I get it. I mean, I'm the same way, but it is interesting that our bodies are always giving us feedback, right? On if something's working or not. And I mean, I've done it too where I'm like, oh, I eat this food. And the thing is, once you start really tuning into your body, right, you can't like turn it off. You'll be like
Hmm.
trying to deny that you're having a reaction to something because you're like, I want to eat this. I've seen
I'll
people
pay
do
for
that.
it later.
Exactly. I've seen people do that with dairy. Like it's crazy. They're like, I know I'm going to be like running to the bathroom, but I need this ice cream. And
Well, that's what enzymes are for. You just
right. But it's also this thing, this fear of giving this thing up, and it's like, well, what is underneath the deep connection that you feel to that particular food, like
Mm,
there's something going on there, right? There's an emotional component. There's some sort of belief system around what would happen if you cut it out. There's, all of this other stuff going on that's not just I want to eat this food, I mean,
exactly.
yeah. And so let's talk a little bit. Tapped on it in the beginning, but let's talk a little bit more about that mindset component because, as you mentioned, it was like until that really started coming in, it's like you were bringing all these pieces together, but it sounds like that was kind of the thing that took you over took you over the cliff into the new world
Yeah.
of
I
wonderful
love it.
skin.
Ah, beautiful skin. I'll do a close up so you
There
can
you
see.
go, yes.
Um, well, what's really interesting is I was dealing with the irregular menstrual cycles and the acne, right? And
Mhm,
those are two problems I was ferociously working on my entire 20s. So I'm
mhm,
36 now.
mhm,
And so my entire 20s were just marked by like, okay, I got to do this blood test or this food test or take this supplement or take this hormone. And they would work for a while, but then slowly my periods would become irregular again.
mm, mhm,
And it wasn't until I just started tapping in more to my rhythm as a woman. And I'm like, okay, so if we're creatures of nature, then we're going in rhythm with nature as well.
mhm,
We go on our circadian rhythm, which is like day
mhm,
and night, right?
mhm,
But women also have a 28-day cycle, which is our
mhm,
menstrual cycle. And guess what else goes on a 28-day cycle? The moon.
mhm,
So, looking at my menstrual cycle from a phase of the moon type of
mhm, mhm,
approach was really interesting. And so, whenever you're menstruating, it's kind of like a full moon. It's kind of like a time to stop and release and let go and go within and be internal. And you might want to like stay at home and do certain things in your life. Whereas whenever you're coming through ovulation, like you're feeling more social and more outgoing and things like that. And so
mhm,
I related them to the phases of the moon. And so for people who are into astrology or into that type of thing, you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about, where like the first half of the moon phase is all about going out in the world and
mhm,
putting out new projects, starting new things. And then you can see the full moon as a stop sign. And then the waning moon cycle is more about going within and finishing projects and doing more internal work. And so I just started to see my menstrual cycle as a phasic part of my life. So I have my day and night, but then I also have my monthly cycle
mhm,
and really started paying attention to when do I need to rest? And as a woman, it's hard because especially like we're in a man's world, right? It's not
yeah,
like we don't get time off if we have a hard menstrual cycle or
right,
something going on hormonally. We just have to like power through it. So we're just
mhm,
going against our nature all the time. So one way
mhm,
that people can help with that, if you still have to show up to work, right? And you have kids and it's like you can't just turn your life off. Just incorporating more self-care at that time, like not saying yes to social engagements, like
mhm,
really taking time to like sip some warm tea or do a bath for yourself or take 5 minutes to meditate. Even the little things can make a big difference.
yes, absolutely. And, certainly talked about that on the podcast here. And it's so easy to get out of that mind frame, right? I mean, I friggin' teach about this stuff and I can totally easily fall out of it. But every time I come back to, I definitely I'm always tracking my cycle. But every time I come back to really paying attention to that, um, putting out versus taking in, depending on where I am in the cycle. And just by tracking your cycle, you're going to know. I mean, so many women, that's where you want to start is just track your cycle because
Absolutely.
most women, I don't want to say most, a lot of women do not track their cycle or no, or they I think a lot of times now too is, and I think they're great and I use apps too, right? Because I'm like I don't necessarily remember a date off the top of my head, of when I last started my cycle, but, you know, don't necessarily it's not necessarily gonna tell you when you ovulate, right? Because not every woman ovulates on day 14.
Yeah.
And, and I know some of these apps will adapt to your cycle over time, but still the best way to know if you've ovulated is to take your temperature every morning when you wake up. And I think it's interesting, and I'm the same way, that sometimes we need technology now in order to do these things, and that's fine if that's the case, right? There's definitely ovulation trackers out there. There's things that can track your temperature for you, and just like get that information. But just knowing where you are in that cycle, you can really start to plan out your week, at least, even if you can't like plan a month ahead. It's like, okay, this coming week I'm like in, the second part of my luteal phase, and now is the time to really start kind of pulling back in. I'm not going to feel like wanting to be around a bunch of people. And how helpful that can be, um in order to really just change the whole game for you. I lost you. You're frozen. You're frozen. I was like, you froze.
Yeah.
It was funny because I was like, I think she froze and I'm still talking.
Well, the last thing I heard was just being aware of your ovulation and then being able to plan.
Yeah. Yep. Perfect. So I'll cut out that little area, and we'll
Yeah.
we'll cut back in here. So um let's go into is there any other aspects of mindset that you want to kind of tap on or touch upon?
Um, yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
I would
So
I
we'll get
definitely,
back into
yeah.
that, and then I wanna talk to you about the circadian rhythm, like, shifting when you got into exotic dancing, so,
Okay.
okay. So any other aspects of mindset that you felt were really helpful for you when, you were working on bettering your skin?
Absolutely. I think that what people don't realize is that you have to see the new version of yourself in your mind's eye before it happens.
Mhm.
So before you have evidence of clear skin, you have to believe you have
Mm,
clear skin
mhm,
because you've been telling yourself a story.
mhm,
I have acne. You're
mm,
identifying, you're wrapping your identity in this thing,
mhm,
whether it's acne, whether it's a trauma in your life, whether it's just like a part of you, part of like how you look. We wrap our identity into these things. And
mhm.
so I wrote like a dry erase marker on my mirror, I have clear skin. And I
Mhm,
looked at that every day. I started visualizing myself with clear skin. I started visualizing my skin clearing.
mhm,
I started just saying things to myself like, wow, I can't believe my skin has been clear for this long. And
mm,
it didn't happen immediately, right? But
mhm,
I do believe because I incorporated that part into my my whole routine, like that was the missing cornerstone of it
mhm,
all. Because
mhm.
really, all of our health issues are rooted in our emotions and our belief systems. And
Yes.
so until you go in and change those underlying programs, your body is still operating on that belief system, even though your conscious mind wants to be like, I'm doing everything right. I'm taking all the pills. Like, why is this not
Mm,
healing for me? It's
mhm,
because you have to get behind your own healing first. You have to see
mhm,
it and believe it
mhm.
within.
Yeah, I love that. You have to get behind your own healing. That's such a huge part of it because, I work with people all the time and I get it because I've been there. When you're in that desperation mode and you're just like, I need to get better.
Mhm.
But there is this huge lack of belief that you can get better when, so many times there. And so it's, really stepping back, and I always tell clients and people that, you kind of have to figure out for yourself whether have you dealt with your trauma enough, to where you can really that's where I think the mindset jump really comes from, is like you have to deal with some of that underlying trauma, and then you can get this different belief in yourself. And that's when that mindset is
Absolutely.
just like, boom, things really fly forward.
Well, as messed up as it sounds, these traumas and things are our medicine.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned earlier, I had to get to a place where I was grateful for my acne because I was like, wow, thank
Yeah.
you for showing me something else was going on underneath. And what do you think acne is? It's on your face, right? Usually, it's and your face is how you present yourself to the world. It's your
Mhm.
self-esteem. It's
Mm,
how other people see you. And so when I got into the nitty-gritty, I was like, wow, I do have self-esteem problems. I am really hard on myself. I am sort of ashamed of how I'm being seen by others
mm,
and
mm.
all these little intricacies of my personality that I was like, wow, it's like the acne is was trying to show me where I was self-harming in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah. And I completely agree as somebody who has rosacea, or I say I have rosacea because it's something that certainly can flare, but I very rarely have flares now. It's not a major issue for me like it was my late 20s, early 30s. And that definitely was a time in my life that was calling me to stand up and being myself. And I didn't, my self worth was not where it needed to be. And it was all of those sort of fears of putting myself into the world and my ability
Mm,
to do what I wanted to do. Was I able to actually, handle the things that I wanted to be doing? And all of that so much showed up as flares and rosacea. And so, and I mean, I can even remember when I was younger, like I just was writing about this the other day on Instagram because I did a storytelling day, right? And giving speeches and when I was younger in school and even when I was in my 20s in my master's program, I mean, I would just get beet red, like immediately. And to get to a place where I'm actually choosing to go do storytelling, and for some people, that may not be that big of a shift or change, but for me, that was huge to move from
mhm.
not wanting to be seen really at all, especially in a speaking engagement kind of way. Because so many people were like, "But you were a dancer, a dance instructor for so long," and I was like, "That felt different," even though that took a while for me to get to too. But really standing up and speaking in front of people, and so I say all that to remind people of our abilities to change drastically in our lives, right? When we work on these things, when we work on the self worth, and take on things that come our way as challenges to like help us grow, and like beautiful challenges.
Absolutely. If we dig a little deeper, there's usually wisdom in our body and the answers are there too. If the
Yep,
problem is in our body, the answer is there too.
it's so true. So let's talk a little bit about, I know that as you moved into doing exotic dancing, and that's just within the past couple of years, is that correct?
Well, actually, I started dancing when I was 29.
Oh, okay.
And so
Oh,
it's been like 7 or 8 years now. Yeah.
okay. And so you started doing nighttime work at that point, essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah. So what happened then? Because as we talked about circadian rhythms a little while ago, that's like throwing it off because you're probably going to bed at like 3, 4, 5 a.m. and sleeping, that first part of the day. So did you notice a shift in your health when you first started doing that?
So I've always had kind of a night owl
Gotcha.
chronotype
Gotcha.
about myself. I find it easy to stay up till 2 a.m.
Mm,
um, and that sort of thing. But I never really understood how some people could live their whole lives that way and
mhm.
not have any problems, but then
Mhm.
some people have so many problems
Right.
if they try to live in the wrong part of the day, I say.
Right.
So there's a whole thing called your chronotype, which is
Mhm.
basically how you best operate according to the rhythm of the sunlight and nighttime, right?
Mhm.
So some people are more geared to stay up late at night and some people are not. And you have to be really clear and know which person
Mm.
you are because
Mhm.
otherwise it will become really stressful on your body.
Mhm.
But I'd say the biggest thing was understanding that I could also with my mentality shift my belief around working late and it impacting
Mm.
my body.
Mm, mhm.
So that was huge for me. I actually was going around saying, this is harming me. This is harming me, but I was still doing it, right?
Right, right.
And then I was like, wait, but is it? I feel
Mhm.
healthy, like I feel
Mm.
balanced. And it just as soon as you take control of your belief system in your body, everything changes. I'm telling you. This has been the biggest aha breakthrough for me as just someone in the healing field for so long. It's like
Mhm.
just taking control of that mindset piece. And so for me, I was feeling a little stressed in the mornings, like you feel a little groggier when you wake up because you're waking up around noon.
Mhm.
You're definitely experiencing um I don't feel like it would be any different than if you weren't getting the proper amount of sleep, but you were
Right.
waking up at 6 a.m.
Right.
every
I was
day,
like,
you
there's
know?
a lot of people that wake up groggy anyway. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was like, am I just telling myself a story? And so what I've done to combat a lot of that is definitely upped my self-care big time.
Mhm.
So I
Mhm.
am a self-care junkie,
Mhm. Nice.
self-proclaimed. And one of the things I do every month is a what I call a queen bath.
Mhm.
And I do that on the new moon and on the full moon of every
Mhm.
month.
Okay.
And the queen bath can be whatever you want. So I really enjoy taking epically long baths. So the Epsom salts and the bubbles, and I'll put herbs in the bath and all the things, have all the candles, maybe put on a meditation from YouTube or just some
Mhm.
healing music and just really sit and allow myself to like indulge in my senses and just
Mm.
really rest and relax. So that's something I've incorporated into my routine that I feel has had a huge impact on balancing my menstrual cycles
Mhm.
and just like being able to recoup and regenerate my energy as a woman, especially doing the
Mm.
type of work that I do as an exotic dancer.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like that's a lot of outward energy that you're giving in your work. And I think a lot of women can relate to that no matter what kind of work that they do. That there's that outward energy so much, right? And it's like we got to pull that back in for our own to like refill our, our systems and our whatever you want to call it, your your glass, your pail, whatever, your energy, and so yeah, it's so funny. I've had these great conversations today that make me feel like magical. Like you just talking about that bath. I'm like, yes, I want to go take that bath right now.
Yes, it's so important to just to fill in those moments. And one of the things that I do is just I'm super picky about the foods and supplements that go into my
Mhm,
body.
mhm,
I've educated myself as a nutritionist over the years, so it's been a little easier for me.
mhm,
So it's exciting for me to actually take all this knowledge that I've gained and be able to apply it to my life.
mhm,
And it's very exciting because I'm pivoting into supporting exotic dancers with their
mhm,
health.
mhm.
And I'm taking the skincare that I do, the nutrition and everything, and using it to support them and balancing, like creating a balanced life, even though that they have this kind of alternative world that they live in that
Right,
can be really stressful on the body. It's a lot of energy,
right.
it's a lot of outward exertion, and you're an athlete. You're
Yeah,
basically, an
yeah.
athlete, and so you have to treat your body as such. And a lot of people don't realize that and end up when they don't prepare going to fast food and like eating late at night and
Yeah.
like doing things they shouldn't do. Whereas if they just prepared and brought a meal into work or brought a protein shake in, that they could have like avoided that late night burger
Mm.
and fries and
Mhm,
everything like that.
absolutely. Yeah, I was gonna ask if you come across a lot of women that are kind of struggling with their health, if they've been doing exotic dancing for a while, because I know for me, I could certainly fall into that, like, routine, especially if you're working that hard at that time of night, and then just at the end being like, "Yeah, just give me, like, whatever greasy food," you know? I mean, it's like you
Mhm.
I would think have to be a very conscious person to not choose to do that.
Yeah, it's all about setting yourself up for success
Yeah.
with anything. And I tell my nutrition clients this all the time. It's like you have to eat 3 times a day.
Right.
It shouldn't be a surprise every day when you wake up
Good point.
that you have to feed yourself.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah. Oh my
if
god, what am I
we
gonna eat today? Yeah, yeah.
but that used to be me. I used to
Yeah.
just wake up and drink coffee
Yeah.
and go 4 hours before eating
Yeah.
anything because I dreaded making myself breakfast.
Oh,
And so
so
now I
hard on
just
our
eat
poor
the
little
same thing
adrenals.
for breakfast every
Yes.
day.
Yep.
Just
Yep.
like make it easy for yourself,
Yep.
right? So yeah,
Absolutely.
it's pretty funny.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Do you end up working with, like, are a lot of the women in their 20s, I'm assuming, or in their early 30s that you work with?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. It can be a range. There
Yeah.
are a lot of younger women, which I've been drawn to working with my entire career.
Mhm.
I've tended to attract clients that are in their early 20s and are just like maybe having their first spiritual awakening as a
Mhm.
woman or like really kind of coming into themselves. It's such a like vital time right
Mhm.
then in your early 20s until you're 25
Mhm.
to really establish your boundaries and like step into the woman that you're
Mhm.
becoming. And so I love being able to influence a young woman at that time in her life. And I think it just naturally kind of came about like women were observing how I conducted myself
Mhm.
and the ways that I took care of myself and how my body was in such good shape
Mhm.
and all of these things like seeing me make great money, so like there's
Mhm.
all these things they're like secretly taking notes on and watching me, so they
Mhm.
just kind of individually started coming to me and being like, hey, so what do you like, what is your workout routine, or like what are you doing for your skin, and just like
Mm.
these kind of naturally evolved, and I just started helping them with different aspects, and I was like, wow, I'm an expert at this
Yeah.
because I've been doing it for 8 years and taking care of myself, and so now I can pass some of that on to them.
Right.
It's a very cool experience.
Yeah, very cool. And I can imagine particularly some of the larger cities like in the US and everything where there's just especially I don't know, I'm imagining like New York, like I would be if I was exotic dancing there, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to go out and just be out the rest of the night and eat all the things and drink all the things, especially if you're like 25. I don't know.
Hmm.
So it's like you're a good resource and also the way that you do look and carry yourself, it's like, okay, yeah, this is what can happen if you start taking care of yourself now, like especially if you want to continue that career long term, right, and keep making that money, like
Right.
you gotta the outer vessel's gotta look good like the inner vessel does too.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
think I started dancing because I really enjoyed it. Like was learning pole dance for fun and it felt like very liberating to me.
Mm-hmm.
And I really wanted to pay to be able to afford to invest in my health. Like I wanted to be able to
Mm-hmm.
buy supplements and I wanted to be able to get the testing I wanted. So
Mm-hmm.
actually it's very funny how this medicine has come out of that. Like I've always still continued to do health coaching.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then I started dancing and just do it a couple times a week.
Mm-hmm.
And it's it's been able to like give me the monetary freedom to be able to then invest back into myself with
Mm-hmm.
the supplements and things that I want. So it's been a very interesting like addition to my career, but also is like like leading the way into the next phase of things for me. And I
Mm.
think that the I call it sex work.
Mm-hmm.
it's not that exotic dancers are having sex in the clubs,
Right.
but it is
It is a
considered
form,
sex
yeah.
work.
Mhm.
But I think that I've always been really interested in women's rights and
Mhm.
supporting women who are not advocating for themselves. And I really
Mm.
feel like women should take more care with themselves and their boundaries and their vessel. And I don't think that a lot of women in that industry do that. Even though
Mm.
they're good people, I
Mhm.
just think like it's really easy to get sucked into the lifestyle of having drinks every night at work and
Mhm.
like all of those types of things. So really just showing women like there's actually another way. And the exotic dancer community is actually very conscious and
Mhm.
it's really interesting. A lot of people think it is a lot of just people on drugs or
Mhm. Right,
people
right,
that don't have any other choice, but that's not true at all.
right.
Like these are empowered women who are going after it. They're oftentimes in school, they're supporting a
Mhm.
family, they're like really intelligent women who are interested in healing and astrology and all these beautiful things. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, there's quite a diverse community in that world, and I
Yeah.
I want to shed more light on the fact that it is a legitimate job. It is a legitimate way to be in the world, and it is allowing women to kind of break free from a lot of the shame and the, I guess, more like oppressive
Mm-hmm.
energies in the world that I think have been on us a long time.
Yeah. Well, it's like taking back control of your own narrative, you know?
Mhm.
And really, yeah, empowering yourself to kind of do what you want to do in this life, right? And like you said, like you're able to sort of take care of yourself on a different level because of this, you know? So it's like you've taken control of the narrative. You're able to really use it in ways that are self-sustaining and that maybe you wouldn't have been able to otherwise, because as we all know, like taking care of yourself unfortunately is not cheap. It's I mean, I
Yes.
hope that this changes in the next few years because I understand how much it can, be a barrier for some people to be able to access like functional medicine and things like that, and so it's like, how do we get around these old confines around women and really run with what we want to
Yeah,
be
well,
doing, making money doing
the
it.
whole the whole medical system needs to shift, and
Mhm.
especially women's care, and I feel that the more women that are empowered with money, the more that they can take care of themselves and really make the changes in the world that we need to see. I truly believe that women are the way showers,
Yep.
and we are the ones that carry the magic and we carry the gifts. And for me, exotic dancing allowed me to come out of my shell in a way I've never experienced before. Like, you
Mm.
literally just become this superhero in heels and
Mhm.
command attention. And it really, I think, went hand in hand with my healing, just allowing myself
Mm.
to fully embrace my sensuality, my sexuality, and my body, and release the shame, release that pressure of being perfect and looking perfect. And
Mhm.
getting that direct feedback of the club of being like, oh, you don't have to look a certain way or be a certain way to make money. And it just
Mhm.
like elevated my self-esteem, and then that's when my skin cleared. I just was like, okay,
Mm.
this is, I can fully be myself. I don't have to be ashamed of this part of myself.
Mhm.
I can be a health coach and an exotic dancer. I can be
Mhm.
this and that. And so many times women are just putting ourselves into boxes,
Right.
and I feel like it's important for us to embrace our weirdness and our magic and whatever it is that makes us different and really step into that, and that's when the true healing happens.
Yes, that's so beautiful. And I feel like everything you just said can definitely be a program that you can create for women too. Like I was like thinking as you were talking, I was like, oh, this is good. This is a good like self-guided program that she can teach at some point too, you know? So
I'm ready.
just throwing that out there, I think there's so many layers to the work that you're doing. And so even just that, getting women into their bodies, loving their bodies as they
Mhm.
are, and all the healing that can come from that is so hugely important. Ah, such a good conversation. So
Yes.
let everybody know how they can get in touch with you.
Well, I am over on Instagram at Danielle Sholly. You can send me a DM and we can talk about what it is you're looking to do, whether it's a new skincare routine, whether if anything else I said piqued your interest. We can definitely, I create custom programs for people and I work one-on-one. So I'm excited to just work with people in whatever capacity they come to me with and create something that's totally unique to them. It's very exciting.
Nice, sweet. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this amazing information with us today and like really going there in these, different arenas that aren't talked about enough. So I appreciate you sharing your story with us.
Thank you, Christine. Such a
Absolutely.
pleasure.
Yeah. All right, you guys, I will see you next time.